Hi, everyone. My name is Kanika Chadda Gupta, and I am so delighted to be here with you today as part of this conference. I love that the unifying factor is the fact that we're all moms, and this was a very difficult year for all of us. But I think through the challenges, we have grown leaps and bounds right alongside our children. I am a journalist and television personality, an entrepreneur, and a podcaster. And last but not least, a mother of three. I had my three kids in a year and a half. I have twins who are now 4 and a 2.5-year-old. And I feel like they were the reason I have shifted gears in my life completely and have taken on my new career path. And I'm just so blessed to have Krish, Sahana, and Shrey, and my husband in my life. So, to begin today's presentation, I'm going to be talking about podcasting and how it's really instrumental in content and marketing and getting your voice out there. I come from a television background, so nothing I'm not used to, but it's new media, and I think we all have something to learn. I also I'm going to discuss the art of the interview. So there are certain do's and don'ts when it comes to doing a good interview and a memorable interview. And so I'm going to go over those insider tips with you. And lastly, if you want to be on a podcast, you could be a small business owner or entrepreneur, and you know that you want to get that exposure. So I'm going to talk about what you would need to do to put yourself out there and get the press you deserve. So I will start my presentation. So that's me. I am a journalist first and foremost. I was a television anchor with CNN and an entrepreneur and podcaster, as I mentioned. So the shape of the day is circle. No, this is not homeschooling preschool, but just to have a little fun, the circle is going to be the running theme of my presentation because I really believe that life comes full circle. And so you'll see how that happened to me. And this is a fun meme. This is us day one of homeschooling and life in a pandemic. And that's us day, what is it? Day, over 365 that we've been doing this, but we're pros. Okay, so Chronology Agency is my digital marketing firm, and it has a circle logo. And so how did I get to this point? As I mentioned, I was a television anchor for CNN where I was posted in India, and I actually hosted a show called Eat Tonight. So it was very much a lifestyle show where I was covering celebrity gossip. And I realized that storytelling is what I love most. I grew up watching Oprah and Connie Chung and knew that I wanted to be making news and telling really compelling stories. So after my career in television, I actually switched gears and went into digital media. And so my company, Chronology, helps entrepreneurs build their online footprint in chronological way. And so we do logo design and branding and web design and video production, really doing your storytelling for your brand online. So today's checklist, I'm going to go over my background, the circle of life, my priorities pie chart, my podcast and my inner circle. That's Total Mom Sense, which is the name of the show. My guests and topics, media kit, affiliations and partnerships, reviews, and of course, at the end of the live session, we can do a Q&A. So here's my resume. I graduated from Boston University and then went on to doing my master's at University of Miami. And as I mentioned, that is my television experience that I had. I actually moved to India on a whim. I was interning at NBC, and my mentor said, in order to be on air, you can try your hand at an international market. And I was born in Bombay, India, and my parents immigrated when I was just 2.5. And life came full circle. I went back there in my adulthood to work in television. And I covered some really milestone events, from the 26/11 terror attacks to a Slumdog Millionaire at the Oscars. But I always found a human interest angle to my stories, and I'll get into that. So you can check me out on YouTube. Just type in my name, and you can watch a lot of my reports. So I want to highlight Slumdog. What I did there was, everybody was focused on the big Oscar win, but I felt like there was so much more to the movie. And so I did an expose on the child actress. Her name is Rubina Ali, and she was the child that was actually cast from the slums. So she didn't have even a roof over her head, and grew up in abject poverty. And cut to, she's riding a plane for the first time. She's walking the red carpet at Kodak Theater, and she has an Oscar in her hand at 8 years old. So that was the story that I chose to tell about that iconic movie. And I've always been someone to find ties to human connection in my storytelling work. So as I mentioned, born in Bombay, raised in Maryland. That's my family. I have one sister. She's there in the corner. I'm a proud Indian American, and it's great to have two very rich cultures to celebrate. This is my husband, and this is me pregnant with the twins. So I had 3 kids in a year and a half. So the 2 kids on the sides, those are the boy-girl twins of mine. And the baby in the middle is just 18 months younger. And like I said, I was thrown into the deep end of motherhood. It was sink or swim. I had to learn so much since I had them in such a short span of time. Here's my priorities, different things that I work on. So family takes up most of my pie. And the podcast and Chronology are a close second and third. I also, of course, create time for myself, for my community, and BNI's networking. I'm doing events like this because I think it's so important to fill our cups with different elements and facets to our life so that we're truly satisfied and feel fulfilled. And I highly recommend a book that was written by Samantha Edis. She was a guest on my podcast. The Pie Life is her book. And it talks about exactly this, how we can have it all. You just have to split things up into slices. That's Total Mom Sense as a podcast. So I came up with the idea when I was nursing my third at 3 a.m. And I was listening to podcasts on my earbuds because I was too tired to read a book, and I felt like podcasts for me were a conversation. They made me feel less alone. And, during the pandemic, as families and moms, we've been really, really cut off. And so sometimes hearing voices in your ear makes you feel like you're part of a conversation again. So that's why I started listening to them in the first place. And I was listening to mom podcasts. And then I found out that after, kind of fishing around and learning about them, I felt like this space was bereft of a show that was fulfilled 3 pillars: was informative, inclusive, and engaging. And I set out to build that. So that's Total Mom Sense for me. Our mom sense is our built-in sixth sense. It's our superpower of intuition that we have. And what I cover on the show is working mom life, pregnancy, parenting, lifestyle, wellness, but all the topics that, no one really prepares you for. So I've done a show on what to expect after pregnancy. After you give birth, now what? What are the things that you need to know as a first-time mom, and how to get your child to sleep. I feel like that's the biggest challenge in the early days. So I actually brought on a pediatrician who believes in co-sleeping, and a professional who is a sleep trainer, two very opposite sides of the spectrum, to shed light on how to get your baby to sleep. And I think it's so important to share the entire picture, because at the end of the day, it's not your doctor, nor your in-laws, nor your nanny who can tell you how to raise your child or know what's best. You have your mom sense, and you should just trust that 100%. I've brought on many different luminaries on the show. So Rebecca Minkoff was a guest. We all know her as a famous designer based in New York, and she's also the founder of the Female Founder Collective. She talks about, we actually met in person. So this was around Fashion Week, and she talked about the frenzy of preparing for her presentation at New York Fashion Week and having to pump and breastfeed her third child. So that's real talk, with what it's like being a mom and a designer. The next one is Bobby Brown. So she shared a really kind of open and honest interview with me. We all know her for her cosmetic line. And in fact, that's not the only thing that she's done. She sold that line 10 years ago. So she now has Jones Road, her new makeup line. She has a line of supplements and vitamins called Evolution 18, a photography studio called Label 18. And what else? She owns the George Hotel in Montclair, New Jersey. But in addition to all of her entrepreneurial ventures, she's a mom of three, and she has three sons, and her youngest just graduated high school. And she gave the most powerful commencement speech of 2020. I recommend you listen to it. It's on iHeartRadio. And she talks about what a new graduate should feel as they're embarking on their life in a pandemic. And at the end of the day, you have to just put yourself out there and get over it. She also shared how she was more often than not found at Michael's, the art store, buying poster board or googly eyes for a project for her kids, rather than being at some gala in the city. And so that is so refreshing, because she is a real mom like the rest of us, and she has to help with the school projects. And she made it a point to be the PTA president. So she went above and beyond as a mother. And at the end of the day, even though she was building an empire, you show up, you decide where you want to show up. And the reason why I really love this interview is because we see her in the press, in Forbes, in Entrepreneur, in Marie Claire, but all any of the writers ask about are her makeup lines and, her kind of advice in beauty. But she's so much more. And on the podcast, she goes there and she talks about motherhood. Reshma Sojani is another pioneer and female leader. She's a founder of Girls Who Code and wrote a book called Brave Not Perfect. But she opens up about her surrogacy journey on my show. And that's something that you wouldn't hear on her TED Talk. And lastly, Natalie Morales, celebrated journalist and NBC anchor. And she talks about what it was like growing up as an army brat and traveling from city to city, and how, even though that informed her career in journalism, she said food is what brought her family together. So she came out with a cookbook called At Home with Natalie, where she shares her most favorite recipes. And so even though she was traveling all the time on the job, she still made it a point to cook for her husband and two sons and make cooking a fun family event, and she was the glue in that. Here is a testimonial from Bobby Brown.
Loved working with Kanika. She has such great questions. She's so upbeat, and I love her story also.
So thank you, Bobby. That was really sweet, and it was an honor to have you on my show. So you can check out That's Total Mom Sense on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, wherever you listen. And I would love to have you join my tribe so that you can feel like all of your mom and parenting and wellness and lifestyle questions are answered by these female thought leaders. Okay, why podcasting matters. So there, as of 2021, there are 1.75 million podcasts out there, 43 million episodes out there. And it started at just 70,000 when in 2020. So it's amazing how exponentially podcasts have come in the pandemic, because it's the one thing you don't have to sit and watch it like a video. You can have it playing in the background or while you're commuting in the car. And it's been quite a lifesaver for my audience of parents. And if you're interested in having a podcast as a mom, there are ways to go about it, and it's so relevant to your audience. And so here are some stats. There's 85 million mothers in America, and 40% of them are the sole or primary source of income. And they also own 40% of privately operated businesses in America. So we are really taking on this small business kind of role. And even though 2.2 million of us left during the pandemic, left the workforce, we're now starting our own businesses, which is really empowering. So podcasting 101, you need to get prepared. So if you want to start a podcast and you know that, you want to bring on celebrity guests or experts and really create a space for yourself, first do an introductory call to ideate topics. Do your research, read your guests' books and watch their videos, understand who their families are, their kids' ages, listen when they're talking during the interview. Make sure you have your own signature style, an X factor. Why would people listen to your show over someone else who is in the same category as you? I like to end with the same questions at the end. I always ask my guests 3 things. What is a quote that you live by? What's your mom sense moment? A moment that you trusted your intuition, and mom haul. What is a product you're loving? And so, without fail, you'll always hear those 3 questions on my show, and you can come up with something like that to always tie your show back together. And with a fun tagline, if you like, you could do a rapid fire. Just really make the interview your own. You want to look the part, so use Zoom for your audio and video, and make sure that you have that time to look professional as you're doing this. Get a team together. There is like many moving parts to producing a podcast, and there's many platforms to publish. I use liberated syndication. So after recording the Zoom and having the audio and video, I get it edited into a half an hour show with music and all the bells and whistles, and then upload it to Libsyn where it airs. And there's an RSS feed, so you can listen to it on my website or listen to it on Apple or Stitcher or wherever. Then, of course, you have to promote social media, cross-promote, collaborate with other creators. And then lastly, monetize. Align with businesses that you feel are, in your, interesting to your demo. And you can create like an income and a revenue stream through this, because they can sponsor the show and by advertising, and you can create a package unique to the sponsor on what you could bring them as the podcaster and essentially a press and PR arm for their business. Okay, so you want to be a host on a podcast, or you want to be featured on one. So for podcasters, here are some quick tips. Be specific. Write emails to the correct point of contact, not like hello there if you're reaching out to a prominent guest or PR rep. And do your homework. Find out more about them, what you admire, why you want them as a guest on your show, and your value prop. think about your audience and the guest target market and find that intersection. How would this interview be relevant to your guest audience and yours as well? And that way they have this asset to promote on their end. For interviewees, if you are an entrepreneur or a thought leader yourself and you want to be on a podcast, same thing. You have to be specific as you write to the podcaster. Tell him or her that you've listened to certain episodes and you enjoyed them, and then state your own value prop. Why should they feature you as a guest on their show? Oftentimes, podcasters only are doing this once a week, so it's 52 episodes a year. So it's pretty competitive, to get this kind of press. So why should you be a guest on a show and be one of their 52 and kind of have your reasons and supporting arguments for this? Do's and don'ts. What's the biggest challenge in your specific role and how are you going to overcome it? That's a do. What is a legacy that you want to leave behind? And this is basically interview questions that I'm stating. What's the biggest surprise you've had in the last few months? If you had extra budget, how would you spend it? These are different, really interesting interview questions you could ask. These are some don'ts. Don't avoid cliches like, how are you today? How are you feeling? That's the one thing that I never did when I was on air, especially during my live shots. I would never, have the microphone in hand and say, how are you feeling? You just won this award. How are you feeling? Well, great. What else is that person going to say? So come up with a different way to ask that question so that it's not so trite. Another question like that is, tell me about yourself. It's so open-ended. If you were to ask a guest, tell me about yourself, they wouldn't even know where to start. So make sure you get specific and say, what was the one childhood memory that you had that still, like haunts you today, or it has manifested in how you raise your own kids? Like, you can get really specific with that, even if you want to cover a broader story. Let's see, if you want to ask tough questions, you can say things like, naysayers may say, or just want to play devil's advocate. And that way you ask the question, but you don't put anyone off. And lastly, make sure that you're talking to your guest. You're not talking at them. So talk to them as though you're talking to a friend. And those are my tips for podcasting. You can follow my social media accounts. I'm most active on Instagram. So my Insta handle is at Kanika Chadda Gupta. And that's my company Chronology on there. And everything that I post for my personal deals with That's Total Mom Sense. And I would love to stay in touch and help you with your podcasting endeavors. Like I said, if you want to launch a podcast or if you want to be on one, especially in this mom and parenting community that we're part of. So feel free to email me or call me. That's my info right there. I'm very open to hearing from you, and I love connecting with new friends. And lastly, life is a circle. The end of one journey is the beginning of the next. And I feel like that's what motherhood and child rearing and reinventing ourselves is all about. Everything comes full circle and nothing ever ends, and that's what's so exciting about it. So that is my presentation for today. My media kit. So here is my media kit, which I feel like all podcasters should have. And it has where you've been seen, a little bit of a about section, your audience statistics, and then it goes into distribution, engagement, guests. So here are my guests, and sponsors. I feel like that's a whole other presentation right there, but how to secure the best sponsors for you. Praise. This is like, reviews from my guests. That's my mentor, Sarah Hardin. and then you can contact for rates and kind of base sponsorship on what serves that brand and their audience the best. And this was a case study for Gaiam. I'm a brand ambassador for the wellness brand Gaiam. And these are some things you can gain as deliverables. And of course, you can connect with me here too. So that's my media kit. And okay, well, I really, really hope you enjoyed it and got some insights on what podcasting is all about and how it's really a phenomenon in the parenting space. I hope this was helpful, and I'm so, so glad to be part of this community. Thank you.